Hello, everyone. Welcome to Start the Week with Spencer. This is our weekly webinar here at Doman International, where we tackle really important topics for children with special needs. And we also take questions from parents around the world with children with special needs. And we really urge parents to come with their biggest, toughest, most important questions, and we will get to them during this session. Now, today we have a very special episode and a pretty serious topic, but I think it's one that concerns basically every parent of a child who has a developmental delay or special needs. And that is, how do you prevent regression with children in their development? Many parents will say to us, I'm very fearful that my child might go through a period of regression. Parents often hear this from other parents. And so how do we prevent regression? And also, what are steps we can take to respond to it if it does happen? So that's going to be the topic of today. Before we jump into the topic, just a couple of quick announcements. So I do want to tell everyone about some of the upcoming trips that Doman International is going to be taking. So in September, Doman International is going to be doing appointments in Miami, Florida. And we're also going to be making a trip to Europe and seeing families in Serbia and Croatia. In October, we're going to be seeing families in our European headquarters in Italy. And just to let you all know, I think we only have like 2 or 3 places available for our European center. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out to Colleen sooner rather than later. In November, we're sending staff to India and Dubai. In December, we're seeing families in California. And then in next February, we're coming to Australia and New Zealand. Of course, we have appointments available year-round in Philadelphia at our headquarters here. Colleen, any idea when the next appointments are available in Philadelphia?
Well, we do have an opening for September 15th. We had a family who had to move their appointment, but after that, we're looking at November 3rd is the next appointment. But now is really a good time to be planning for that, because it gives us ample opportunity to coach the family in advance. There's a lot of things that we need to get done prior to the appointment, and parents receive coaching immediately just to get started with some simple things to learn more about the Doman Method. So when they arrive for their appointment, they really hit the ground running. This is great.
And I do want to say to everyone, we are in many places booking out 2 months in advance now. The September 15th availability is just because a family happened to cancel their trip. But as Colleen said, the next available appointment isn't until November. So if you're interested, reach out to Colleen. Colleen, how can people contact you?
So my email address is info@domaninternational.org. My phone number, you can use WhatsApp or you can text me, you can call too, obviously, is country code 1-814-232-8668. Those are the best ways to get me. Those are the most direct. But if you want to send a message through Instagram or Facebook, I see those as well. So that's also.
And I put Colleen's email up on the screen. So jumping into today's topic of preventing and responding to regression in special needs children. As I said, this is kind of one of these topics that strikes fear into the heart of every parent, because parents hear from other parents sometimes that their children will go through regressions. Let me just start out by talking about a little bit about what I mean by regression. I mean any major step backwards in a child's development. So for example, a child talking who loses speech, or a child who is mobile who loses mobility, or a child whose behavior all of a sudden becomes erratic or violent. These are or a child maybe who doesn't engage in sensory stimming behaviors all of a sudden doing it, right? That's what I mean by regression. It's very upsetting. And I have to say it's obvious for most parents when it happens, because it's so obvious. When I say regression, I'm not really talking about a cold or a mild setback, right? Children are going to naturally have ups and downs in their lives. Sometimes children will have an illness, for example, and they'll bounce back within a week or two and be back to their normal selves. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something more serious and concerning when children lose abilities and sometimes they don't come back quick. So I want to talk first of all, what are the two most common causes in our experience of regression? So the two most common causes are either something that affects the child physiologically or something that affects the child emotionally. Physiological cause of regression or emotional cause of regression. Let's start with physiological. So physiology is the function of the body, right? And so sometimes a child will experience something physiologically that causes a regression. Maybe they have a reaction to a medication, or they start going swimming and they respond poorly to the chemicals in the pool, or they contract a specific illness, which they have a bad reaction to. Those are kind of physiological causes of regression. Chronic sleep deprivation, things like that can really create sometimes physiology. The second cause of regression is emotional. And that can come, for example, if a child has a very emotionally upsetting or traumatic experience. So, for example, parents move homes and the child now is in a different home. Again, that may not seem something like something which is traumatic in general, but for some children with specific kinds of neurological issues, something that might seem mundane to us could seem traumatic to them, right? Could be a change in their life, starting school for the first time, starting a new therapy. They start going to ABA therapy and it's very upsetting and stressful for them. And all of a sudden they have some kind of regression. Unfortunately, I do have to say, when I talk to a lot of parents about emotional causes of regression, school and therapy tend to be two of the highest causes. Okay. And then probably third would be maybe changes in the family, a family member moves away, something like that. And the child, doesn't get to see someone who's important in their life. Could be that. But I do have to say, unfortunately, school and therapy tend to be up there. So there are physiological causes of regression. In my experience, those are the majority of the reasons, right? Something affects the child their bodily function, that causes the regression. And then in some children, it's an emotional cause. Now, what is the number one factor that I have found that helps parents prevent regression? This might be very surprising. It might be a surprising answer, but I've come to this conclusion after almost 20 years of working with families. My number one factor that I found is helpful in preventing and also responding to regression is how aware are parents to changes in their child's life? How aware are parents to changes in their child's life? Let me give an example of this so you can see where I'm coming from. So imagine two different moms contact me and they both, let's say their child was speaking and now their child doesn't talk anymore. The child just stopped speaking out of the blue. And imagine I speak to mom A and I say to the mom, "Oh, your child stopped speaking. What changed?" Right? My first question to a parent will always be, "What changed? What changed in your child's life?" And mom A goes, "Nothing changed. Like we're doing the same thing as before," right? That is a big concern to me because I know in life things are always changing. And it's not that mom doesn't care. She cares deeply, obviously, but she isn't fully aware, that mom or dad isn't fully aware of all of the changes that are occurring in their child's life. And then imagine parent B, where I say, "Hey, what changed?" And they go, "Oh, last Wednesday we started swim lessons. And the babysitter we've been hiring 2 weeks ago, she quit and she departed. Oh, and we started a B complex supplement on Saturday. And on Monday, we found mold in the kitchen, right? I'm going to be much more likely to help parent B than parent A, because parent B is making mental notes of changes, or sometimes they're actually writing down, which I would recommend, any potential changes in their child's life. Because think about it, each of those changes that parent B listed are now variables, right? They're things that have changed in the child's life. They may not be negative, right? But they are still a possible cause. And what we can do with that family is we can say, all right, got it. You started swim lessons last Wednesday. Let's stop those for a few weeks and let's see what happens. And you started that B complex supplement. Let's stop that for a little bit, of time. Okay. And then the babysitter, quitting, who your child loved. Have you sat down and talked to your child about that? Like, have you had a conversation about that change in your child's life and maybe told them where the babysitter is now and everything's okay? And parents go, no, we haven't done that. Oh, okay. Why don't we do that? Right. So we can actually tackle those variables one by one and help guide the parents through that process. But for that parent A who says nothing changed, our ability to help them is going to be much less, right? And because in the end, we can bring our knowledge and experience to the situation. And of course, we can also ask parents questions that often help parents, figure out what those variables are. But the more aware parents are, very, very important. And that's why I would recommend to parents, and I do recommend this all the time, that that you keep a journal about your child. It can be very simple, where just anytime something changes in your child's life, you make a small note of it. You say, oh, today we stopped using this detergent for our laundry and we started using this one. Oh, we added a reverse osmosis water filter on this day. We brought in we repainted the living room today. Those things, again, they might seem mundane to you, but for a child who is physiologically sensitive, those changes might be major, right? A chemical in that paint might be affecting them. A chemical in that detergent might be affecting them, and you're just simply not aware of it, right? And so keeping a journal, and some parents might hear this and go, well, that sounds a little neurotic. I understand that, but what I will tell you is, if you've ever spoken to a parent of a child who's experienced regression, they will tell you, oh, I wish I had been doing that. Okay. So it's a very good way for you to keep track of things. And also, our memories are unreliable. Okay. And so it's a good way to overcome that. So I do want to say, for families on our program, this is an important thing for any family who's come for an appointment. We have something which is called our physiological troubleshooting checklist. So when a family reaches out to their Doman International staff coach and they go, I'm worried, I think my child has experienced a regression, we have a checklist we actually run through with the family to help bring this information out, right? Like, have you changed anything in your supplements, that you're giving your child? Have you changed anything in your child's daily routine? Do you have any mold in your home? Does anyone who smokes, interacting with your child? We have, I think it's like 75 different points that we found that could potentially be the cause of a child's regression. And that can be very helpful for parents, because obviously sometimes they may not be aware of some of these things. The last thing that I would say for parents on the Doman International program is, reach out to your staff coach as quickly as possible. If you are fearful that your child might have regressed in some area of their development, the sooner you tell your DI staff coach, the better, because your memory is better. You remember the changes that you've made over the prior several weeks. Usually, if a mom contacted me and said, yesterday my child let's say their balance started to become worse and I don't know what's going on, my first questions would be, okay, what changed within the last 2 weeks? Because sometimes the cause of the regression isn't something that happened 5 minutes before. It might have been something that the child had prolonged exposure to over time. And then once they had that prolonged exposure, it hit a specific point where the regression occurred. I'll give an example of this. I was speaking to a family, this was about 6 months ago, and this family, the child out of nowhere, this child had learned to walk on the Doman International program, started immobile. We got this child crawling, creeping, and walking. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, the child lost their balance. And the child would get up, take a couple steps, topple over, and parents were like, what is going on? How did my child go from walking to not walking? And so I started speaking to the parents, and we first went through all the variables of things that had changed, and we resolved those issues. No, the child's balance was still poor. And then I have to start, in my coaching of the family, I had to start looking back further. And I realized that this child was on an anticonvulsant medication, had been on a medication for years. And I looked up the side effects of the medication. It turns out balance problems are a side effect of this anticonvulsant medication. So once the parents were aware of that, with our medical staff, with the guidance of our medical staff, they weaned the child off the anticonvulsant medication. I want to say they also had the help of their neurologist. And the child's balance problems went away, just like that. So that child had been on that anticonvulsant medication for a long time, but hadn't experienced specific side effects. But then those side effects started to affect the child. And by the way, the parents said to me, wow, our primary care physician, our neurologist, our cardiologist, not a single one of them said, wow, maybe this could be a medication reaction. No one had even considered that as a possibility or mentioned it to the parents. So that's why it's so important to be aware of changes in the child, things like medication reactions, dietary changes, vaccinations, right? Anything that can in any way impact a child's physiology is an important thing for parents to be taking note of. And I do have to say, this is not an area, unfortunately, that you can just rely on professionals. It's just not. This is not a place where you can say, this is not my area of expertise, because in the end, you actually know what's changing in your child's life better than anyone else. And that's why sometimes a parent will reach out to me and say, Spencer, my child's experienced a regression. What should I do? And my first thing is, I say, I have to get on the phone with you and find out what's going on. Like, I can't guess willy-nilly what is going on with your child's regression. I need to talk to the number one expert in the child, you, to find out what's changed. Colleen, any thoughts, any questions that you would have about regression?
Actually. So let's say that, let's say a family has has moved house. I'm asking this because this actually happened in my own family. Let's say they've moved house and they realize that their child experiences a regression, and by going through everything, they realize, oh, it's the house, it's the new house. I'm bringing this up because I think sometimes it can feel very. What had happened in this is my extended family. My one cousin had very, very severe asthma, and they moved to a new house, new construction, which they thought would be more healthful for her. But unfortunately, within 6 months, she was having really worse symptoms than ever. And they tried, air purifiers and everything. They ended up within the year selling the house and moving to another place.
Did they ever get down to like what the root cause was in the new house?
They They didn't. I mean, again, this is my extended family, so they weren't. I mean, at least they were responsive to Amy's, distress. But and they were great, obviously. But um, they just kind of they said, well, the new construction, there's a
Mm,
lot of off gassing with
yeah.
those newer materials and things. It's actually and on the East Coast, because they were thinking mold and great, no
Yes.
mold, and isn't that wonderful? Well, yeah, but all of the new lumber, all of the new paint and fixtures were just giving off
Yeah.
things that made her even sicker. And it was really,
Yeah.
this was more than 20 years ago now, but it was pretty
Yeah.
extreme.
Yeah, and by the way, I see we have a good question from Smile today on Instagram. I'll answer your question next. But this is a good question, and whenever we're looking at something in the environment, I tend to look at mold first. That tends to be the first. Our clinical staff often calls mold the silent killer because it's something that can be lingering in parents' homes for long periods, and it's a constant uh, barrier to good health for a child. So especially when we have a child who's very ill constantly or has asthmatic issues, we've had parents where we say, do you have mold in the house? No, and we say, find the mold, and they'll say, no, there's no mold. There's no find the mold, and they will always find the mold. They'll pull out of bed, find mold behind the bed. They look under the kitchen sink, they find mold. There's always gonna with those families, there's always going to be mold. So we look at mold first. I wonder for your cousin specifically, the first thing that comes to mind, if we're not talking about mold or something like dust in carpeting, is actually they spray a lot of construction materials with inflammable
Yeah, flame
chemicals to try to
retardant.
flame retardant.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the term I'm looking for. With flame retardants, and I understand why they do it. They don't want them to catch fire easily. The problem is a lot of these flame retardants have neurotoxins. They have toxins that can impact the body. We have certain children that even when they check into a hotel, because a lot of hotels spray the walls with flame retardants. Again, they're trying to stop fires. I get it. But some of our highly sensitive children diagnosed with autism, ADD, or have respiratory issues, sometimes their behavior becomes more erratic or their speech gets worse when they're staying in those kind of places. So yeah, flame retardants are definitely a big concern, and they've become kind of ubiquitous. Like they're used everywhere now. So yeah, those are the kinds of chemicals. Sometimes with children, the physiological reasons are obvious. A parent gives an antibiotic or doctor prescribes an antibiotic and the child kind of changes because all of their good intestinal gut flora has now been wiped out by the antibiotic. By the way, I'm not saying antibiotics are bad. When they're needed, they're very much needed. But they do kill good bacteria and flora as well, and for that reason should be used only when absolutely necessary. But sometimes these causes are obvious, but more times than not, it's not. And so to your point, Colleen, about what a family should do in those situations, I mean, I would probably, advising a family like that, say, hey, can we have your child stay at a family member's home or some other place, see how they respond to that. Let's first make sure it actually is the house before just assuming that, because sometimes we make assumptions and they're wrong. I have seen that before where a family, a change occurs and they make an assumption, it was this change, and sometimes it's not, and that has to be kind of rolled out. So that's why it's important to keep a record of everything that's changed. And have there been cases where families need to leave homes? Yes. I have to say it's not common, but it sometimes happens.
It's interesting. Everything you're saying is reminding me again that, our program works because it's a process and really takes our time, which mirrors development. I think that the inclination, like we humans, we want to fix everything yesterday. We're like, okay, let's find the answer and fix the problem, and then we're good. But in fact, child development does not work that way. And so we have to really take our time and try not to feel impatient about it. It's like, no, we're going to get a better result if we've taken the time to get down to that root cause.
Yes. And to your point, Colleen, sometimes things that appear and might even be healthy for the vast majority of the public are problematic for certain children. So let me give an example of this. So there's one teenager on the Doman International program, and this girl, again, has made all kinds of amazing gains on the program. She's teenager with an autism diagnosis. She started speaking in sentences on our program, reading, math, writing, doing so many amazing things. And then out of nowhere, her behavior last year became very erratic. Okay. And, she was just behaving in ways that she had never had before. And mom even said to me, is this just a teenager thing? Is this something we're going to have to live with for the rest of our lives? It was scary. And, it turns out it was a B complex supplement, right? That this girl, there was some kind of ingredient in a B complex supplement that this child was having a negative response to. Now, B complex is an amazing supplement. I take B complex, right? So many people are low in vitamin B, and we give B complex to many children. Our nutritionists, prescribe it for many kids who need it. But, every treatment could have a side effect with an outlier person. And some children are going to be outliers. And so you have to look at everything, even things like healthy foods, supplements, treatments. There's always the potential of a side effect. So it's that awareness that, again, so I think that certain professionals would think no way a B complex would create that problem, right? But through our experience and working with thousands of kids, we know that children can have wild reactions to things. I've seen a child who's intolerant to apples. The food that we all think of as healthy. I've seen a child who every time they ate apples, their behavior would change. So.
I have a friend, a neurotypical friend, he and his sister both growing up, apples felt like burning to them. And they told their mother, this is really, we hate it. She thought they were fussing because they're children, you don't want to eat your fruit. Yeah. Well, grow up and they get some testing, and it turns out that both he and his sister have a hereditary condition that causes a certain enzyme in apple to react with their mouth in that way. And they can eat cooked fruit all day and all night, but the raw fruits, a lot of them, and so, of course, their mother felt very guilty.
So bad, yeah.
Like, oh, you weren't actually making that up.
So we got a question on Instagram from Smile Today 987, and Smile Today is asking, is the program safe to do with kids with infantile spasms, and can it help prevent seizures? So the answer to both questions is yes. We have many children who come onto our program with infantile spasms, or even sometimes very serious seizure disorders. And we have various programs that help with infantile spasms and with epilepsy diagnosis. The most important program that we use is our oxygenation program, which is a program that increases oxygen delivery to the brain through breathing. And very often we can reduce spasms and sometimes entirely prevent them. I was just speaking to a staff member last week who is the staff coach of a child with spasms. And they were telling me that after I think 2 months on the program, that the spasms disappeared. So it's something that we actually see quite commonly. Good question.
Please send an email, Smile Today.
Oh, yeah.
Talk further. Yeah. If you and I haven't talked, since I don't know your name, but please get in touch, because then we can talk about next steps.
Yeah, I threw Colleen's email address on there. And I would also say to this parent that I'd recommend you also get our book, The Doman Method, From Special Needs to Wellness. It's available on Amazon. And we talk a bit about the oxygenation program there. We talk about seizures. So I think you'd find that very helpful. And by the way, I'm assuming your child also is a baby. Best time to start. All right, we've got a question here. Oh, it's maybe more of a comment from Anne. My son experienced a terrible regression from olive oil. Turns out kids with autism can't metabolize phenols in olive oil. That's very interesting, Anne. As I said, there are children that that have negative reactions to different foods. I will talk to our nutrition team specifically about olive oil and see what their thoughts are. But thanks for mentioning that. It's a good example for other parents to be on the lookout for potential causes of regression. I hope your child's doing better, Anne. All right. Oh, by the way, Colleen, Smile today just answered that actually they're asking for a friend who has a child with infantile spasms, but they'll share your contact information with their friend.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. Who else has a question? We still have some time. While we're waiting for the next question, I will say that next week is a holiday here in the US. It's Labor Day. So next Monday, we will not be having an episode. So another good reason why you get your questions in now, because we won't be here next week. Colleen, did we get any pre-submitted questions?
Yes, we did. Thank you for asking. I was just opening those up right now. We have a question. What methods to use when speech therapy has failed?
Unfortunately, speech therapy often fails. I hate to say that, but it's in the vast majority of cases, it doesn't help kids, greatly improve in their speech. So, I think for this, Colleen, do we know if this parent has come for an appointment at Doman International or not?
I don't know. I don't believe that she has.
Okay. So, in the book, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, there is a whole chapter on speech development. And it is, I'll give the number right now. It is chapter 10. It's called Chapter 10, Enhancing Communication and Speech Development. And so in this chapter, we first of all give parents guidelines, like what are the foundations for speech development? What are, guidelines to encourage speech in your child? But there are also pages of speech development techniques. So for example, we talk about, activity number 1 here is songs. And we explain how to use songs, which children often love, to motivate a child to speak for the first time. We talk about how to use rhymes and poems for speech development. And we also talk about certain communication programs like the choice board. I'll show you a quick picture here, which are also really good activity. It's a very good communication activity for children who are still learning how to speak, for children who may have no speech or poor speech. So yeah, I would recommend you read the chapter on speech development and you learn how songs are used. Now, for a parent who orders the book but is maybe not patient, or if you want to hear me talk about this process, we also have a free webinar on YouTube where we talk about speech enhancement. Let me see if I can tell everyone what it's called. I will find this, and I'll try to throw a link also on the Facebook. There it is. It's called Enhancing Speech Development in Children with Special Needs. I will throw the link into the chat, and that way anyone who wants to also watch this video can watch it. I don't talk about everything in the book, obviously, but I talk about certain activities that are recommended in the book that might be helpful. If you're watching me right now on Instagram, afterward, just head over to Facebook or YouTube to find this video, and you'll find the link there. Okay, did we get any other questions, Colleen?
Yes, we did. So we have, that's funny, actually, another question, how to help autistic child with saying words. This is from a mom. Actually, I spoke with her on the phone last week. So
Great.
I think what you just said was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I threw this YouTube video. I mean, the link is too hard for you to write down. But again, if you go to Facebook or YouTube, you'll find this link. Watch the speech enhancement lecture. I think you'll find it very, very enlightening. And, after, watching the video, and then, I think it's a good idea to read the book as well. I would say to these parents to reach out to Colleen, to just hear about the Doman Method, hear about our other programs, because, for a child to speak, for all of us to speak, we need to use between 8 and 12 different regions of our brain simultaneously to produce speech. Because if you think about it, as we're speaking, first of all, we need to have tactile awareness of our mouth and our tongue, right? We need to be able to control our breath, right? We need to have the motor ability, the oral motor ability to move our mouth when needed. There's an auditory component where we have to hear our own speech, right? And that's called auditory feedback. So there are all these different brain regions working in unison. And so even if one of those brain regions is impacted, it can make it much harder for a child to speak. So that's why a holistic program is so important for children with speech delays, because very often a child with a speech delay is just sent to speech therapy. At speech therapy, they'll try to get the child to produce certain sounds, make certain mouth movements. But the problem is it's kind of just reinforcing the child's weakness and difficulty. And what we've discovered with the program is that there are different activities, for example, mobility exercises that can help stimulate the speech areas of the brain, visual exercises that can help stimulate the speech areas of the brain. So when we do this holistic program, it's actually the best way to encourage speech development, because we can stimulate different regions of the brain at the same time.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. The next question I have is from Fumsa. She said, do you have anything I can use to help my children? They have a genetic disorder called Pelizaeus-Merzbacher disease.
Okay. I have never heard of that specific disorder. Colleen, could you throw that into the chat for me?
Absolutely.
Just so I can see the spelling?
Yeah.
Now, what I will say is that the vast majority of genetic conditions, and we have worked with hundreds and hundreds of different genetic diagnoses, the vast majority of them lead to a neurodevelopmental delay, right? So the child might have delayed motor development or speech development or cognitive development or intellectual development or sensory issues that aren't actually directly due to the genetic issue. The genetic problem led to issues in brain development, and then those symptoms are issues of brain development. But the good news is that we can stimulate the brain. And when we do that, those symptoms can start to reduce and in some cases even disappear. So for the vast majority of genetic conditions that exist, those children can really be benefited by the Doman Method. So I think for this family, Colleen, if it's okay, I'll do a little bit of research into this specific diagnosis, and then you can send them more information.
That sounds great. Yeah, it's very helpful. I know that there are, and I'm not saying that this particular diagnosis is new, but I know that there are new diagnoses cropping up every day. I know also that there are new ways of getting this information for families, which can maybe be useful, but I feel like for some of the families I talk to, it's handed to them as a sort of sentence. Like, oh, well, we finally figured out what is causing your child's challenges, and there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah. Which is.
Yeah. And in some ways, Colleen, a lot of parents are led down a little bit of a dishonest road, because they're kind of told, oh, we have to do all this testing to figure out what your child has so we can figure out what kind of treatment your child has. So there's a very kind of optimistic view of like, we just got to get all this testing in and then we can have an answer. And then they come back and say, oh, your child has this rare genetic disorder. There's nothing that can really be done, you know? And it's, for some parents say to me, why did we just go through it with all that testing just to be told that nothing could be done in the first place? And that can be incredibly frustrating. Just looking at, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, Pelizaeus-Merzbacher disease. But by the way, I do want to say one thing. We do keep records of rare genetic diagnoses that we work with. And so I can look and see if we have any children who have had this diagnosis. But if my grandfather, Glenn Doman, were here, I know what he'd say. He'd say, we've definitely seen a child with Pelizaeus-Merzbacher disease, but maybe they hadn't been diagnosed yet, right? Because we worked with children long before these diagnoses were discovered, right? And so we have been working with children with genetic disorders for 70 years with really amazing results. We just weren't fully sure or aware of what their genetic diagnosis was until the last few decades. Now, for this specific diagnosis, it says, that children with this diagnosis often have nystagmus. Nystagmus is a visual problem where the eyeballs will kind of shake, quickly. This is because of dysfunction in a low region of the brain called the midbrain. And we have many programs to help the midbrain. And so we can definitely help nystagmus. Children with this diagnosis tend to have hypotonia, which is low muscle tone. The Doman method is incredibly helpful for helping kids with low muscle tone, not just improve their muscle tone, but improve their motor development. These children tend to have impaired motor development. My grandfather, Glenn Doman, the first programs he created were focused on motor development. It's a huge part of our program. These children also have cognitive impairment and sometimes seizures, right? These are some of the most common symptoms that we work with the Doman method. Based on this preliminary information, I think this child could definitely be helped by the program.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes. Yeah. What's funny, whenever I read, and maybe this is just me, but whenever I read, oh, these children typically have cognitive impairment, I think, well, is anybody trying to teach them to read, or did they just assume that they can't do anything and therefore they have cognitive impairment? Because, we can't.
Because they were never exposed in the first place.
Right. We can't know, maybe we haven't gotten them to the point where they can communicate with speech. Therefore, we assume that, and I'm not saying this about parents, I'm saying this about, medical professionals. Like, well, we assume that you're stupid because you can't talk and you can't read. Well, we haven't done the things that could help you to talk, and we've never tried to teach you to read. So, I mean, really, any of us could be in that boat.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes. How to teach? Okay. I think this is another speech question. How to teach sentence formation for a 4-year-old autistic child? This is from Priyanka.
Good question. Any idea if this is a child who's currently on the program?
I do not know. No.
This is a good one. We, for this mom specifically, I mean, obviously I'd recommend, if the child has autism, to read the book Answering Autism and see the kinds of programs we recommend for these children, and also and to read the speech development chapter in the Answering Autism book. I think I've got it here. Yeah, here it is. You can find it on Amazon, basically everywhere in the world. In terms of teaching sentence formation, we do have specific speech activities that are focused on how do we get a child from speaking in words to speaking sentences. And, we have different activities. Like one thing that we do is something called scripted conversations, where a scripted conversation, imagine like a scene from a play where the child has one part and parent has another part, and parent and child learn their two parts together. And this is very helpful for kids, often with an autism diagnosis, because very often they tend to be very good visual learners. So when they see the text written that they need to say, it helps them. And then when they do that with frequency, they're able to say those sentences on their own, right? They no longer need a visual cue for it. So very often, when we're working with a child, you always want to use that child's strengths to help their weaknesses, right? So for many children, for example, with that autism diagnosis, they tend to be very strong visual learners. For example, if I go to many children diagnosed with autism and I say, hey, imagine there's an animal called, a raccoon, right? And I describe it to them, it might be difficult for them through their auditory pathway to take in all that information. But if I show them a picture of a raccoon, I say, hey, this is a raccoon, and I describe it, I could say the same exact things, but they're seeing it visually. They will learn that information all the better. So with a lot of speech programs, we also use the written word, which is, with the Doman Method is very famous for our reading program. But what often parents don't realize is how important reading is for speech development for children with special needs. Because reading is just the visual form of language, right? When you look at this word, if you can read English, neurons between your eye and your brain carry the information of this text to the brain, and you understand, that's raccoon, right? So that's just visual language as opposed to verbal language, which is what we hear. So when many children with special needs are better visual learners, when we use reading, for speech development activities, we often get better results. I see, Colleen, that we've gotten some questions. So we have one question from Jawad on Instagram who says, my son does things and then forgets. For example, he says mom, mama, and daddy, but all of a sudden he stops for weeks or months. So Jawad, I don't know if you watched the beginning of this presentation, but I talk a lot about preventing regression. So my advice is, as soon as we're done with this webinar, that you go back and you watch from the beginning and you hear what I say about what are different physiological factors that could impact a child and create a regression in development, and then what are the emotional factors that could impact a child. So please, please, please listen back, because if you've got a child who is talking and then their speech disappears, there is some reason for that, right? It may not be obvious to you right now, but there is some reason. And I think if you watch the first 20 minutes or so of this webinar, it'll be very helpful for you to figure out what those causes might be and then starting to tackle them. And of course, I would say for any family who's come to Doman International, if you come to us for appointments and you have a staff coach who you're in communication with, please talk to your staff coach about it, because that's their job to help you through these kinds of situations. There's also a question here from Sandra, who's asking about our opinion about hyperbaric oxygen. So Sandra, really good question. I just copied and pasted it here so people can see. So Sandra, hyperbaric oxygen, we've spoken to some of the world's leading experts in hyperbaric oxygen. Paul Harsh, who's a researcher in New Orleans, is probably maybe the most respected hyperbaric oxygen researcher in the world. And he came and lectured to us maybe about 10 years ago on the subject, and we have great respect for him and other practitioners of hyperbaric. The reason why we don't use hyperbaric oxygen is for a few simple reasons. It's because hyperbaric oxygen treatment is focused on increasing oxygen delivery to the brain and the tissues of the body. But we also have oxygenation programs that we've used in the Doman Method for 70 years. And in our experience, the methods that we use are more efficient, can be done more consistently, and are less expensive. Okay. So it's not that I have a problem with hyperbaric oxygen. In fact, I think it's wonderful. And for certain kinds of issues, like let's say wound care, hyperbaric oxygen is the best thing that exists for it. But when we're talking about increasing oxygen delivery to the brain, the Doman Method oxygenation programs, we just have found more effective and less expensive. So, and for parents where resources are tight and time is short, you've got to go for the things that are most efficient, and spend your resources wisely. Okay, good question. Oh, I do want to say we're currently doing a pilot study with a at-home unit, which uses both hyperbaric and hypobaric oxygen, and it's something that can be utilized at home and is far less expensive than, for example, going and doing hyperbaric oxygen. Now, it's still a part of a pilot study. I think we've done it with like 5 patients on our program. We've been using it with children with motor issues and seizure disorders. So that is something that could potentially become the 5th oxygenation program that's part of the Doman Method, but we still want to make sure it's worth it in terms of results and cost, and of course, safety as well. All right, let's see. We've had a few questions pop up. Virginia's asking, is an MRI okay for a 9-year-old child to rule out if there is a brain injury? So, Virginia, MRI actually would not fully rule out a brain injury, because an MRI will show you if there's obvious structural damage to the brain. It'll take a picture of the brain, but it doesn't necessarily show you at the cellular level if there's been damage to the brain. So I'll just tell you from experience, we have many children that come to Doman International who they can't speak, they can't walk, and they have MRIs, and the MRIs are completely normal. Okay, so it's very possible to have a normal MRI and still have functional brain damage that just is not apparent on the MRI image. And by the way, I should also say that there are some children who have really MRIs that look disastrous, where whole regions of the brain have been injured, but they have very minor symptoms. So an MRI only shows you a picture of the brain, but it doesn't show you how it functions. Like, my best example of this would be, imagine if I showed you a picture of a car and I ask you, how does this car drive? Does it drive well? You would probably tell me, I don't know. It's just a picture. Like, maybe I can judge certain things from the picture, like, oh, it looks like a new car or it looks like an old car, but you don't know if it drives or not just by looking at a picture. So that's kind of the situation with a lot of MRIs. So I think with an MRI, I mean, if a parent comes to me and says, should we do an MRI? My first question would be like, what's the purpose of it? Because some children, for example, doctors want to rule out very serious things like brain tumors or hydrocephalus, like pressure building in the brain. In those cases, an MRI is 100% necessary. But then there are other cases where you can see clearly a child is functionally injured, right? The child, they're not speaking well, they're not seeing well, they're not walking well. It's obvious that some kind of brain injury has occurred. And that child needs treatment. Even if an MRI is done and it looks clean, that child, if they can't functionally do all the things they need to do, that child needs treatment. And we have many children on the Doman Method who are in that situation. The last thing I always tell the parents is many children need to be sedated for MRIs, right? Because you have to stay in a very tight space for long periods of time. It's uncomfortable. So many children have to be sedated. So you really have to ask the doctors, what's the point of this? Like, what are we really looking for here? Is this going to change my child's treatment course? And if the answer to that is, well, no, we're just kind of seeing, okay, well, then maybe we should just do activities that are good for my child's development and not put my child through that stress. But so it's a good conversation to have with your doctors and see if it's really, really important. All right, we've got a question here. So Motika is asking a very good question. Please, what supplements are good for a baby with Down syndrome? So Motika, the reason why this is a very difficult question for me to answer is because we at the Doman International Clinic give parents guidance with supplements after lab work is done, right? Because we don't like to just say, we don't take a shotgun approach with supplements where we say, give all children these supplements, because some children don't need certain supplements. Some children will have a negative response to certain supplements if they don't need it. And so that's our nutritionists always ask for lab tests to be done first before supplements are recommended. Now, from a general standpoint, what I can say is that many children on the Doman method have probiotics that are given to them, to help increase their good bacteria and flora in their gut. Many children, for example, will get a buffered vitamin C supplement or zinc to improve their immune strength. We have many different supplements that we utilize, for example, for improving immunity, for improving brain function, for children with autism diagnosis. We have certain supplements we'll recommend for improved cognitive function, or to help reduce certain kinds of behaviors. So it really depends on the child and their specific needs. But supplements do play a big role in our nutrition program, Motika. Yeah. Oh, you might find it interesting to read the Doman Cookbook, which is our book all about the nutrition part of the program. It has dietary recommendations in it. Also, for a parent with Down syndrome, I would recommend the book, The Doman Method, From Special Needs to Wellness. I think it's wonderful that we've now had 2 parents on this Q&A who have babies, and I want to say, number one, you're in the right place. And number 2, you're getting started at the right time. The number one thing when a family comes to our clinic, one of the most common things I hear from parents is, oh, I wish I had known about this program when my child was younger. So you're in the right place. Anything you want to add to that, Colleen?
No, that's absolutely, and Motika and I have been in touch. So
Good.
Yes, yeah. So absolutely, just yeah, we'll take it one step at a time. But the cookbook is very useful.
Yeah. All right, I've got a question here from Myra, and I have to say, Myra, I don't fully understand this question, but I'll give you my best attempt at it. So, what does out of state, like Texas, do for results and cost? So, Myra, when it comes to Doman International and our work, the vast majority of our families are out of state, and in fact, even out of the country. We are called Doman International for a reason. So we have families, I think, from 80 different countries around the world currently on our program. We see families in 10 different sites, 10 different clinics. And we have many families from Texas on the program. Now, for families who are not close to us physically, they have a choice. Some parents travel to come and see us. So it's funny that you're from Texas, because we actually, over the last 3 weeks in our clinic, have had 3 families from Texas come to Philadelphia to our clinic. And 2 of them flew, and one of the families was very brave and drove, which they drove with like their 5 children. But most families would fly to our clinic for 3 days to come for an initial appointment. Or if a family cannot travel, we also have remote online options for families. So for example, right before the session today, I did a remote appointment session with a family in New Delhi, India. So we have families all around the world who will do remote sessions with us because they can't travel. But many families also travel to us. Any other, and in terms of cost, Myra, our costs don't change based on where a family lives. There are appointment costs for coming to a specific site. So if a family comes to, our clinic in Philadelphia, it doesn't matter if they're from Philadelphia or from Texas, the cost would be the same. And also the remote session is the same price. So But if you talk to Colleen can talk to you all about costs of the appointment and what that's like.
And I'll say too that the obviously in person is our ideal. We always rather see kids in front of us if we can. But the remote appointments we started, I make a point of telling parents this. We started doing them before the pandemic. We got really good at them during the pandemic. And the reason that we can continue to offer them is we see the value. So, you know, if you really can't come to us, there is a viable option, is my point.
Hi, Colleen. Sorry, you broke
Oh,
up. You broke
I'm
up
so
for me. I don't know if you
sorry.
broke up for everyone else, but
No, I probably did. I saw that you froze too.
okay. Do you mind just finishing your last thought?
Yeah, no, I just said that, you know, of course, we prefer to see kids in person whenever possible, but I make a point of telling families who are maybe struggling with traveling that we started doing remote appointments prior to the pandemic. We continued them and got very, very good at them during the pandemic. And so we are able to continue offering them because we do see the value. And, you know, so I don't want families who are like, oh, we're really stuck, we can't travel, to feel as if it's an also ran option. It's very viable. But if there's any way for you to get to us, you know, definitely get to us.
Yeah, and one final question that has come in. Leslie is asking, do you recommend mushroom supplements for kids? So interestingly, I would say over the last 2 years or so, mushroom supplements have been one of the, let's say, latest additions of supplements for children on the Doman Method program. We don't give them to everyone, but there are certain mushroom supplements that can be helpful for things like cognition, for memory and retention, and also anti-inflammatory supplements. So, there are certain mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, that can be helpful for children with certain kinds of symptoms. But again, it's not something that I would say a blanket recommendation of everyone should do this. Do not, please do not just go and give your child a supplement without knowing what it's all about. It's something that our nutrition team would determine off of lab work and the specific symptoms that children have. Yeah. And I have to say personally, I am interested in some of the other therapeutics around mushrooms. This is a side comment that doesn't really have totally to do with our work, but even the power of like anti-cancer mushrooms. I had a family member who recently was using certain kinds of mushrooms as part of their anti-cancer therapy and is in remission. Now, I'm not saying that's because of the mushrooms, but it was one of the things they did. And there's more and more research coming out about certain kinds of mushrooms having anti-cancer effects. So I think there's a lot of exciting things there in that area of research, but I think it's also still a relatively new area where more needs to be discovered. All right. Well, thank you, Matika. So everyone, thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. Remember, no session next week because it's a holiday here in the US, but it gives all of you more time to go back and watch the beginning of this webinar if you missed it, where we talk about how do you prevent and respond to regression in special needs children if, heaven forbid, it happens. Colleen, thanks so much for joining. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.